Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Tank Observers podcast. My name is Jackson McCarty, as always joined alongside by my co-host Chris Barr. And Chris, what are we doing today?
Offensive linemen. We were talking about tight ends.
We were.
Now it's the real thick boys.
If you know how the order goes on a depth chart or on Madden when you're scrolling through the things, you've got a pretty good grasp of what's coming next. But you already know the format. If you don't, go watch the other videos. But
Please do.
let's go ahead and kick this thing off. The first one that we are buying or selling. Penei Sewell is the best offensive tackle prospect of the past 10 years. We can't say the decade because that would just be him and Andrew Thomas, I guess.
Pretty much.
But are you buying or selling, Topher?
Me, I'm buying. See, if I'm going to comp someone to Ronnie Stanley, which I do, he's going to be as good as Ronnie Stanley because I am never wrong.
Interesting way to start that one off.
He simply has too few flaws. See, you look back over the past 10 years and you see Eric Flowers and Luke Jokel. That was a thing. Remember when he got moved to guard and still got cut?
Still just wasn't awesome.
It's a trend. These guys, they come in, no matter how good they look, and they don't perform. But here's the thing. They all have flaws.
Yes.
There's simply not enough flaws in Penei Sewell's game to constitute him as not being the best. And I know I'm trying to bring this into like these guys after they hit the NFL.
Right.
As a prospect, I don't see enough flaws to say that there's ever been someone that can top him. Maybe Trent Williams. Trent Williams was incredible, and he was right at the top of that 10-year mark in 2010.
I say right inside.
He just makes it. Greg Robinson was phenomenal. And frankly, if I did have something to pick on Penei for, it's his ability to guard like those big, strong guys. J.J. Watt. J.J. Watt would throw him around a little. But Greg Robinson had that issue too.
Yeah.
I think that is a much more fixable issue for him than it was for Greg. Clearly, since Greg Robinson is no longer being rostered in the NFL.
See, the reason Topher keeps bringing up Greg Robinson is because, as weird as it is to say and as weird as it sounds now, I think Greg Robinson was a better prospect than Penei Sewell. And hear me out on this. He started 1 year and looked like an absolute world beater. There was nothing he couldn't do. His only real downside was that he was a bit raw, and we knew that. Obviously, it did not work out in the NFL, but strictly from what he was doing at Auburn, he was playing better defenses. He was playing with better players, having to keep them upright. And he went number 2 in a draft class. Offensive tackles hardly ever go that high anymore. And it's just a simple fact because edge rushers and quarterbacks are now getting that traction. And I would even argue he's not the most polished that's come out lately. I think Eric Fisher was more polished in college. It's one of those things where he's a jack of all trades and is probably third or second, but he's not first. If you want to go with polish, I think Eric Fisher beats him out. If you want to go with overall talent, that what could have been, I think you go Greg Robinson. But Penei Sewell just a tad outside, and that unfortunately causes me to sell. Great player.
I disagree, but that's kind of the whole idea of this show.
That is our gimmick, isn't it? All right, number 2. Which has better talent and depth? One of us is going to take one or the other. Topher will be representing the tackle class. He's buying on that one. I'm buying on the interior side of the ball. Topher, you want me to kick it off or you got it?
I literally just said Penei Sewell is the best left tackle in the past 10 years,
Yes.
at least prospect-wise. So why wouldn't I be taking offensive tackles here?
Fair.
If anything, he carries the entire class. But I don't have to stop there. We have Alex Leatherwood and Alaric Jackson.
We took a crash course in this before we went on air to make sure we didn't say it wrong.
Alaric Jackson.
Still didn't get there, but we're working on it.
Alaric Jackson. See, I can say it right. It's a thing. You also have deeper guys like Walker Little, who's probably going to hang around for 5 rounds. We'll get to him later.
You will get to him in a bit.
And it's just a really stacked class. They're too big to fail, literally and figuratively. They're monster humans. Most of them are 6'7" and 6'8". They're ridiculous. Dylan
Raduns.
Raduns. I wrote these names down. I still can't say them. It's tough. It's like Alberto. We just avoided it completely.
We still don't know it. He's in the NFL. Professionals have said his name on countless occasions for Denver. We still don't get it. I only learned how to say Igbenogany a couple weeks ago, the corner from Auburn.
That's the Noah, right?
Yeah, Noah.
On Miami.
Igbenogany.
Noah.
Yeah.
His name's Noah.
Maybe we'll do an episode where it's just us failing to pronounce large names.
We could just crop this as a whole thing. We could just put this all together. It'll be so much fun. But yes, I am buying on tackles. They are, it's just too stacked. It's a very stacked class. I'd say it reminds me of 2014, but too many of those guys were busts.
Yeah, but as prospects, very similar.
Yes, Taylor Lewan, Jake Matthews, and the Greg Robinson.
The Greg Robinson, the man.
One of the best left tackles out of that class was in the 7th round, Charles Leno Jr. He went to Chicago.
And, I mean, he's lasted longer than Greg has.
That's true.
But I will agree with you, Topher. I think offensive tackle is top-heavy. But on the inside of the ball, and maybe it's because I have 3 positions to your 2, and that is a bit of a handicap for you. But when you look at that class, there's nothing. They're not missing anything. For one, Creed Humphrey is one of the better centers that we've seen come out in recent memory. I don't think that that's debatable. Other than the fact that he's left-handed and it could cause issues with some righties, I think he should go to Miami because they've got a certain lefty that could really use some great protection, and he's the type of guy to do it. But I digress. You look at teams like Ohio State and Tennessee. Both of them combined are putting out 4 total, what I think is starting quality players. Cade Mays and Trey Smith from Tennessee, and then guys we'll hit on later, Josh Myers and Wyatt Davis out of Ohio State. Those right there from just 2 teams, 4 starters in the NFL. If not their first year, year 2. Absolutely.
See, I just think that's where the tackles win. We have a lot more people coming out of the gate that are going to be starters right away in the NFL. Those 3 that I named are the 3 that I think will be just first-year starters.
Maybe so, but even whenever you're considering the depth part of this question, you look at guys like Deontay Brown, who's coming out of Alabama, pretty notorious for making some hogs up there. One of your guys, Alex Leatherwood, comes from the same class. I don't think he'll be somebody who starts immediately. I think he's a bit of a developmental guy, but he could make an impact. And even when you get into like the 5th, 6th, 7th round, you've got guys like Tommy Kramer, Sedarius Hutchinson. Those guys project kind of like a Charles Leno, where you take a minute, you figure out what they're good at, you figure out how to bring that out, especially Tommy Kramer. If he goes to somebody like Tennessee, which I'm not particularly savvy on how well or poor their offensive line is right now, but he is meant for power running backs. So if you can get him on a line that is guarding a big bruising running back, he'll have a field day. He could turn out to be one of the better players in this class, in my opinion. But yeah, I think that offensive tackle probably has it at the top, but it goes a lot deeper than that.
Speaking of Tennessee, another 2014 right tackle, Juwan James from Tennessee.
Juwan James. Yeah, we're gonna
throwing out info there.
We keep looping back to that 2014 class just because it's an offensive lineman draft, and that's one of their high points at the time that it happened. Not so much anymore, considering, but hey, it's a great class.
It really was. It's my personal favorite. That's why I know everything about it.
Since we keep talking about that 2014 class and the tackles they had stored in it, let's circle back to that tackle spot. Who are you buying personally as the offensive tackle 2, right or left, behind Penei Sewell?
Thank you for asking. Alex Leatherwood is my number 2 tackle out of this class. It's not even a question for me. It isn't at all. I have him graded very highly. Perhaps I wasn't very nice with his comp when I first did it a few months ago. Gave him good old Cam Robinson. Very notorious draft bust. Sorry, Jacksonville. But I literally just took my draft notes and copy and pasted them. I'll read them off to you because I'm very generous at the top and then very mean at the bottom. He's ridiculously strong, loves pancaking people. Real strong guy. He contains power rushers with relative ease. He's super average.
Which that's not always a bad
compliment.
Thing. That's not a bad thing.
Sometimes it's nice to be vanilla. You know who else is average? Charles Leno Jr. And that gentleman just got a nice little contract extension like a year ago.
Very nice little contract. DJ Humphries, very vanilla. Got a lot of money.
Yes, I don't know why though. And he's a solid pass blocker. The issue is that sometimes he gets confused on screens, relatively inconsistent, especially when it comes to speed rushers. And I'd like to see better lateral movement because he doesn't like to bend his knees. And there's another fella that didn't like to bend his knees when he tried to block, and that was Eric Flowers. And and perhaps we literally have something named after him, EFS, Eric Flowers syndrome, when you have to get moved to guard. And it happened to him, and then he got nice little contract from Miami. I think it's like $10 million a year.
Yeah. It's 3 for 30.
3 for 30. Overpaid a little bit, but hey, I'm sure they're happy with it. They're doing well for some reason.
Alex Leatherwood has improved a little bit, like you were mentioning. This was from May, I believe.
Yes.
Is when we were, before draft time really kicked off and we were in quarantine and unable to record, we had a Google Docs where we were doing scouting reports on players. And somebody I had not featured because, quite frankly, smaller school, hadn't really heard of him yet. But I went back, watched some tape, and he kind of caught my eye whenever I was watching Trey Lance's tape, Dylan Radunes. That's the whole reason I know how to say that last name. Quite frankly, doesn't matter if they're in the FCS anymore. We're seeing FCS players taken at a extremely high level, and I know that competition level does matter, but what is the real separation of who he's playing, which is the cream of the crop in the FCS, versus who Brigham Young has to face every week, or the Mountain West Conference, or like these guys that the Sun Belt even, which is, I'm very fond of the Sun Belt. That's where I came from. But it's these guys they're D1 athletes. They're just not playing in it. James Madison University has a lot of good players. In fact, they just had a quarterback that came in for the Dallas Cowboys last week with, what's his name? Ben DiNucci. Ben DiNucci is from James Madison. And they have NFL talent down there. And I think the FCS notion has been a little overblown. And even if it is slightly lower, he is demolishing this team. Or he's demolishing other teams, correction. The only nagging issue I see, he gets a little trigger happy and it lets his technique slip. But outside of that, if he was at, let's say, Houston, or let's say Boise State, I think that he would legitimately be challenging Penei Sewell in this class.
That's a big reach.
Very big if.
I'm not sure if he was listening to what I was saying earlier about the best left tackle in the past 10 years. Because you just said that.
I did.
Sure. You definitely said it.
And I do think Penei Sewell would win outright. But I think that Radunes has a legitimate claim to go in the top 12, even out of an FCS school. Which, has that ever happened where 2 FCS players go in the first round? Because if Radunes and Trey Lance go in the first,
I don't know.
That could be a fact check, and I'll check that later. But
yeah, he'll do that.
It's just something that could happen, and I think quite legitimately should.
I mean, I would love to. That would be so cool. I'm a huge offensive lineman guy.
Very. These are the Topher episodes.
Yes, tight ends and offensive linemen, the most boring players on the field. Unless you're watching a 49ers game.
Or Kyle Pitts.
Kyle Pitts.
Man that you really loved last episode.
He's a dog.
But
Kyle Pitts is a dog.
Kyle Pitts is a dog. But if you don't already know about that, go back and
watch the other episode.
I
talk loud there too.
That's your stick. Moving on to number 4. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. Ohio State has 2 great interior linemen coming out. One plays on the right guard spot, Wyatt Davis. One plays center, Josh Myers. Topher, we are here to figure out which one is better. I'm going to go ahead and kick this one off. It's Wyatt Davis. Look,
goofy boy.
if you have to point out when you're making a big board, and you're just looking at the overall talent of these players. I did this earlier. Wyatt Davis came in as 10th for me in the entire class. Right guard is not a desirable position. I think he might go lower than Josh Myers strictly because of centers outweighing right guards typically in the draft. But hear me out here. I don't see a whole lot that I don't like about his tape. He's polished. He's strong. He has great technique. There's nobody that gets past him. He's just an overall solid player, and I think he is a top 10 player if you take out positions. So, yeah. Now, I presume you are to make a point about one Mr. Joshua Myers.
Here's what I love about Joshua Myers.
Okay.
He is so safe. You can't miss on Josh Myers because he's not going to make mistakes. He's not going to win you games. He's like, remember when Joe Flacco was still good?
Yes.
He's not going to win you games, but he's not going to make that big mistake. He's not going to make that mistake that loses you the game either. That's what Joshua Myers is. He's an athletic big man who's very good at blocking downfield on run plays, which Ohio State loves to do.
They do love that.
And that's pretty much it. And you mentioned strong.
Yes.
If offensive linemen weren't strong, there'd be a serious issue, and they probably wouldn't be playing Division I football.
No.
That's why I didn't mention it. He's also strong because, he's like 300 pounds.
Yeah, he's a bully. You have to be a bully if you're going to be out
These are bully boys. Yeah. The interior are bulldogs, and the outside are also they're mastiffs. They're like big bulldogs.
Yeah,
they're tall. They're tall bulldogs.
Those don't have to be as strong because there's more lenience for technique.
Yes, that's also why they get drafted higher.
But yeah, either way, if you're looking at that Ohio State line, there's a lot of talent decorating it.
There's a lot of stuff to like.
So, for the final segment of the show, if you've been paying attention here, there has been a recurring theme. We haven't really highlighted it yet, but we've decided from this moment forward to do so. So, every episode, Topher has been saying that he is so not impressed by somebody.
I have been doing that.
So, for the last one, I'm going to let Topher go solo here. Tell me who you are so not impressed by in this.
Walker Little.
Yes.
I hope you watch this.
Jesus.
Because let me tell you something, bud. I am so not impressed. And I'll tell you why.
That's going to be a nightmare to edit. That is going to be so loud.
Listen, bud, you have a thing that we like to call EFS.
Yes.
You're going to be one of the few 6'7" offensive guards in the NFL if someone picks you and does you justice. Because you're not built for the outside, my friend. You're just not. You get beat. Around. You give up. In lacrosse, it's called topside. You give up topside so easily and you get run around. You can't block short dudes. But on the inside, you have help to the sides. You have two people here.
To kind of piggyback on that.
So you don't need to be that strong on the outside. All you need to do is push the guy down. If you try to do that on the outside, he's going to run around you. And that's what happens to you a lot. EFS. Play guard.
His feet are a bit muddy, but
exactly.
That has been who Topher is.
So not impressed with
this for this one, and we'll have many more of those to come. So stay tuned for maybe your favorite player will get just absolutely demolished by Topher. But anyways, that brings us to the end of the show. As always, my name's Jackson McCarty.
And I eat Kraft mac and cheese.
We'll see you next time.
But is he the best player in this draft on his own? Without that.